Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Estate Right Now, where we talk about real estate matters that matter to you. And I am telling you, today's show is awesome. You know what? Listen, here, you know what? Houses are sold every single day, right? But what does a first time home buyer really go through when they're buying their house? And we happen to have today a great guest who purchased his first home, Bill Smith, right?
That's me.
That's you. And Bill purchased his first home with, did you use Tony Fink?
Yep, I use Tony.
Okay, Tony Fink, who is with Linda Craft Team Realtors. And by the way, we're live here at the Linda Craft Team Realtor Studio here in Raleigh, North Carolina, part of the Research Triangle Park. So, Billy, let's just get right into it. So, this is your first home.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you're 25. So, what motivated you to want to buy a home?
For me, I know it's obviously it's an important piece financially, just in the long term and an investment. And just being young in my career, I felt like the earlier I could get it, the better. Obviously, you want to make sure your finances are all together before you
Right.
make a decision like that. But really, I wanted more space, and I wanted to have that financial tool in my pocket.
Okay, you're not married.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so you're a single guy.
I'm not single. I do live with my girlfriend.
Okay, you have a girlfriend. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, but did you kind of make this decision together then with her?
I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, when you were going about this process of purchasing your first home, I mean, take us through some of the emotional ride that you had. I mean, were you a little bit nervous, about buying your first home, or was this something that you were like, I am so ready to get out of an apartment and own my own thing? What was that emotional process like for you?
I think I was definitely all the above. You're nervous, but you're also quite ready because I think the nerve comes from the financial piece,
Right.
right? Being young, you don't have all the money in the world
Right.
to put down on a house, so you want to make sure what you're buying is a good deal, or like you're feeling comfortable with your purchase. But at the same time, it's it's buying a house, so you're excited.
Okay. So when you started your process, I'm assuming you did the typical thing. You found a lender,
Hmm.
right? And you got pre-qualified.
Hmm.
And when you went through that process, right? Because we've had lenders on the show before, and they tell us that, we check everything. We go through your entire history. How was that process for you when you first went to the lender and they said, "Hey, listen, we're going to go back and we're going to do a background check and everything you do." How did you feel about that process?
So I went to Tony first, and then he
Okay.
referred me to his lender, who was his name's Paul, and it was pretty painless, honestly. We were done in about an hour, and he told me what I could get approved for, and it was actually easier than I thought it would be.
Really?
Hmm.
What was your expectation when you went in? What were you thinking it might be?
Honestly, I wasn't thinking as much of that piece going into it. I'm thinking more, okay, where do I want to be? How much space do I want? How much is it going to cost? Like, I'll probably get approved for this. This is what I know I can afford, but it was good to get down in the details with the lender
Okay.
too.
All right. So when you get approved and Tony puts you in a car, you guys are riding around trying to, or maybe you were following him, whatever it may be, right? You're looking at houses, right? So talk to us about that first meeting that you had with Tony. What did he do in terms of getting you ready to go look at houses?
So the first meeting, he asked me a lot of questions about, I guess, what I was looking for in general, and
Mm,
I hadn't thought that deeply about all the different pieces of what a realtor might think, and try to like narrow down everything to help you with their search. And also keep in mind, I bought in February, so the market was crazy. There wasn't much to choose from.
right.
So yeah, that's what I would say.
But the interest rates were a little lower.
The interest rates are definitely lower. Yeah.
You may not have had a
In
great,
hindsight, it was good. Yeah.
yeah, you may not have had a lot of
Mhm.
choices, but you had a lower interest rate, right?
Mhm.
Which you felt more comfortable about. So he probably sent you a bunch of properties, probably to pick and choose from.
Mhm.
Did you have certain things in your first home that you were like, I got to have this, or what was it more for you in terms of what that
For
decision?
For me, I definitely wanted an office space. I have a hybrid work schedule,
Okay.
so having an extra room for an office, and I did want a back deck. But honestly, and I think that the big takeaway for me was I should have thought more about that stuff than I did
Mm,
the financial piece of it. I was worried more about, is what I'm buying going to be a good deal for the long term?
mm,
And I think I should have focused more on that,
And why do you say that? Why do you say that now in hindsight that you think about that?
because I think buying a home is a pretty safe investment
Mhm.
regardless, as long as you're obviously not putting in some crazy offer. But I think it's going to be a home, so you should put more thought into that piece of it rather than the financials. And I think that's what I was caught up in, trying to
Okay.
find the best deal or the safest bet,
Oh, okay. All right.
just because it's so much of it, it was so much of my money
Right.
for me at the time. So I wanted to make sure that was the most important thing to
Well,
me.
it's a huge investment, right? I
Hmm.
mean, we always say in real estate that, it's probably the largest personal investment you're ever going to make
Hmm.
is a home. So you had the left brain going, right? The left side of your brain going,
Hmm.
okay, is this logical? Does this make the most sense? Does this make the most financial sense? You were thinking about that versus your right brain side of you that was going, okay,
How many square feet? Where do I need to be? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
okay, okay. So you go through, how many houses do you think you guys looked at?
We only looked at two.
Really?
Got it on the first offer too. Yep.
Really?
Hmm.
You only looked at 2 houses.
Hmm.
Did that surprise you?
That did surprise me. I didn't expect to get the house we put in the first offer either.
Really?
Yep,
You expected it to be a little bit longer process.
I did for sure.
Okay.
But I knew in that market that if you didn't act at right then and there, it was going to be gone the next day.
Mhm.
So the first one that I saw that I was like, wow, this would work. This is great. It makes sense.
Right.
Pulled the trigger and they accepted. So
So, first of all, let me just say that I find you to be spectacular, because you're 25 years old, and there's not a lot of 25-year-olds who are out there purchasing a home. What's some pieces of advice you would give your cohort, because you're kind of that millennial, I guess maybe even close to the Gen Z.
I think I technically am Gen Z.
You're
Yeah.
technically Gen Z,
Hmm.
right? So what advice would you give, people in your cohort? Because I'm Gen X. So people in your cohort, advice would you give them, like when you're considering purchasing a house, that you did to help you be prepared for that?
Think a lot of people think you need to have that 20% down payment. And there's a lot of things in place for first time home buyers where you don't really need to have that. And the PMI really isn't all that bad, um, in my opinion.
Okay.
So I think you don't have to have that huge lump sum, and you have to look at it as a long term investment. And just obviously, you have to save your money and be disciplined there. So
Yeah, that was the one thing that I was wondering. I mean, have you always been disciplined about saving money? Is that something that you've always been good at, or?
I would say so. When I first got out of school, I got a job where I was on the road 100%. So I didn't have any expenses,
Mm.
and I lived on the road for a year and a half.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's how I saved my money.
Okay.
Not the traditional way, but it worked. So
Okay, so, I mean, but it is so important to have that, just because you're on the road,
hmm.
right? I get it. You're on the road and you're working and everything, but,
Hmm.
you know, spending is something that people like to do is
Hmm.
spend, right? And yet you didn't spend. I mean, how do you keep yourself from doing that?
They the company covered everything in terms of food and lodging,
Oh,
but
okay.
in terms of just extra spending, I did keep it to a minimum just
Okay.
because I knew it was a great opportunity for me to save up.
So now I'm just thinking that there's probably show's gonna be watched by a lot of people, and or listened to by a lot of people. They're probably going, okay, well, what does Bill do? What did Bill do that he was on the road? Can you share?
Yeah, so I work for a tool manufacturer, and we have a call it the van program, and I just rode around the country selling tools.
Really?
Hmm.
That's cool.
Hmm.
That's cool. So that was enabled you to save your money, because you were on the road, you were doing your thing, you were able to save some money. And then when was that decision along the way where you said, okay, now's the time? When did that happen for you?
Now's the time to buy a
By after,
house.
yeah.
So afterwards, I rented an apartment after I'd finished that role, I rented an apartment when I got promoted and living in Raleigh for about a year, and I would just I would think the money's kind of going to waste. I mean, I don't I can if I can afford a home and I know where I want to be long term, then what's the point of waiting? Because the best time to buy is usually now. So
So, and that was the impetus for you. Now, did your girlfriend have any influence on you in terms of
she did, and I talked through it with her. She knew that's what I really wanted to do, and I
okay.
pushed for it, and it all worked out in the end. So
Well, how much okay, when you guys start looking at houses, right? You got this girlfriend and um how much influence does she have in terms of the house selection?
I think she had her fair share of influence. We both liked it, and so we decided to pull the trigger. Yeah.
For her, was there certain things that you can recall that she was hoping to have that fulfilled what she wanted? Do you remember that?
I think where we were both like-minded is just we wanted more space. So we went from a one bedroom to three bedrooms and three bathrooms. So just having all that more space is, I think that was the main thing.
That was the main thing for you.
Mhm.
And that was for her as well. And
Mhm.
so now though, you go from a one bedroom apartment to owning your own three bedroom, three bath home. Now comes a whole bunch more responsibility, right? I mean, how much did that play into thinking about, okay, I'm about to pull the trigger on a purchase here. I'm also taking on a whole bunch more responsibility, not just the financial
Mhm.
responsibility, but taking care of a house. Did you process that at all?
That wasn't as much of a piece of it just because it's a townhouse and all the exterior is taken care of. So obviously it's more cleaning and the upkeep on the inside is more just because it's more square feet, but it hasn't been too bad for me, honestly.
Who does most of the cleaning, you or her?
She definitely does, but that's because that's how her mind works. She has to clean. So
It's
we're
that's
just two different
yeah,
types.
no, I
It's not
understand.
because I make her, yeah.
No, no, no.
She'll probably laugh when she sees it.
I know,
Yeah.
what, I understand it. I understand
Mhm.
it. My wife is the one who has to kind
Mhm.
of encourage me strongly to go ahead and make the move to,
Mhm.
be a little more clean, right?
Mhm.
In the house. So I understand it. It's not an indictment one way or another. It's just that that's kind of the way it rolls
Mhm.
when it does that. All right. So you go through the negotiating process and you've never been in the negotiations before in a
Not for a
negotiation
house, yeah.
for a house in that sense.
Mhm.
Help people understand the negotiating process and what you went through in terms of okay, you put an offer in and how that all worked. How did Tony help you make that offer and how did you come to the agreement and such and so forth?
Yeah, I think Tony really guided me through that process. He basically asked me how badly do you want this home, like realistically? And I didn't tell him 10 out of 10, but I was like, I could definitely see us living here and I like it.
Mhm,
So we put in a fair offer. It wasn't overly aggressive and he did his pricing work and it just all worked out.
mhm.
Yeah.
Now, did you when he presented you and said, "I think we should start," or you guys come to the agreement of saying, "I think we should go with this." How did you feel about that when you guys came to this agreement and said, "Well, this is what we're going to offer."
Mhm.
What was your thought process there?
I truthfully didn't expect to get it just because at the time it was such a hard it was a hard time to get a house.
Right.
People were putting in bids way over the list and not getting it or so I didn't truthfully expect to get it. So I don't think the emotion didn't really hit until the seller's agent told Tony that he's probably gonna accept it. And I was like, "Whoa, this is happening." So,
Okay, so
yeah.
all right, so whoa, this is happening moment, right? Now, what are you feeling at that moment where you got the uh-oh?
Now I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I have to pay the due diligence and hopefully, the inspection comes back and all the appraisal comes back good, and it was excitement and equal amounts of worry.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the biggest worry you had, you think, at that time, at that moment?
At that moment, it was it comes back to the financial part, the appraisal. I was worried, "Oh, what if it gets appraised for lower and I have to cover this?" And all of a
Uh,
sudden, that was my biggest worry.
that was your biggest concern. So
Yep.
again, it was a left brain thing, and it was the
Mhm.
left brain part of it that was like, okay, what's the money
Mhm.
going to look like, right? In that terms
Mhm.
of thing. So now you go through, and you didn't have to go back and forth, right? It was you just did it was one offer, and they just accepted the first offer, or did they come back?
It was one offer and then they they had like one other contingency, but the initial price we offered, they did accept. Yeah.
Okay. Can you say what the contingency
It
was?
was he wanted to live in the house for 30 days afterwards. And then we just said that's okay.
Okay.
Because I had the apartment past that time frame. So it worked out.
So, okay, let's talk about that piece.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of people come from an apartment and buying their first home. How did you work that out with your apartment and getting into the home, because you're in a lease? Were you month to month, or how did?
So we had the lease. We technically got the house, I think, in March, and we had the lease until I think May. And we painted the entire place and did new hardwood floors on the second floor while we were still living in the apartment. So it worked out in the end for that.
So you did some work to that. You were doing some work after the seller had left, the original
Yes.
seller had left.
Mhm.
You had plans to do some work in there as well.
Mhm.
So let's talk about that piece, right? Because now, all right, you went into the house. Did you already know up front that you were going to probably have to do that work?
So yeah, the walls were a little bit darker and there's some funky colors, and then the flooring on the second floor was kind of mismatched. So we knew before we moved in we'd probably want to do that.
Okay, so you're going to do that now. That's an additional expense, though,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now you're a guy who's a money guy. I mean, you're a guy who's looking at the finances.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, was this all part of the initial calculation, or how were you?
I can't say it was part of the initial calculation, but I was in agreement that I think it should be done, especially before we move in, because afterward, and my dad kind of convinced me on that part of it. He said it'll be a pain once you move in
Right.
to paint and then install new flooring with all the furniture and everything.
So do that first.
Mhm.
So your dad influenced you
I would say so. Yeah.
on this as well. Now I'm going to ask this question, and you don't have to answer it. Okay. Did your dad help you with any of the financing of the house at all? No,
Mm-mm.
you did it all yourself. Very good
Mhm.
for you, man. That's really awesome. So and you get the hardwoods done, you get the painting done, right? Now it's move-in time. What happens there?
That's where thankfully I purchased from Linda Craft. I have a moving truck. And I recruited all my friends that I could and bought them all dinner afterwards and said thank you. But yeah, it was a long day.
Yeah, it was. Now, a lot of times, you live in a one-bedroom apartment, and people go, well, you can't have all that much stuff. Tell them, you have more stuff than you think
You do have more. Well, we have more, and we both lived in the apartment, so it was two people's stuff, and it was a long day. It was a lot of furniture. So
Yeah. So you move in, all right, you move in, and probably one of the first things you set up is the bed, right?
Mhm.
It's after a long day, you've had dinner with the friends, maybe a few drinks, and kind of, enjoyed the day, and you're now moving into your house, right? It's yours.
Mhm.
How are you sleep that night?
I slept well. I was happy.
Did you? Because a lot of times what happens is, people will buy a house and they will get this initial like buyer's remorse, like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Did you feel any of that?
I can't say I did. No, I was happy with my purchase. I was. Just because especially at the time with the momentum of the market, I just felt like, oh, it worked out. Yeah.
Because I mean, but you can't understand though why people, when they all of a sudden it hits them, right, when
Mhm.
they buy the house, where all of a sudden they go, oh my gosh.
Like, what have I got myself into?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I mean, because you've invested not only purchasing the house, but then you invested in paint, and then you invested in flooring, right? So I mean, you've taken a chunk out of,
Mhm.
your savings. I mean, did that bother you at all?
It did, but it not as much as just, spending money needlessly would, because I know in the long term it was a good thing.
Have,
So
yeah, have,
so paying my mortgage, I don't want to say I'm happy to, but it doesn't feel as painful as paying rent.
right? Because you just felt like the rent money was going nowhere,
Mhm.
whereas you feel like every time you make a payment on this, I'm getting closer to
Yeah,
this
and
being
that's because I knew I want to stay in Raleigh too. So
right.
if I'd had to be more mobile for my job, or there wasn't career growth for me here in Raleigh, I probably would have stuck to renting.
Okay. Okay. So now I'm sure you're still. Did you get all the boxes unpacked?
Mhm. Took a while.
Took a
Yeah.
while, right? I mean, because it seems like everybody lives out of boxes for a while.
Mhm.
Did you guys have to do that too?
I would
Trying to
say we
find out where
lived out like, we brought everything out, but then there was still we had to do the guest room, and then, like, the second floor wasn't fully done, but we we were pretty good about getting all the stuff out of boxes.
how fast did the coffee pot get out?
Oh, yeah, we have a lot of coffee. Yeah, that was out quick. Yeah.
Because a lot of times what happens is people, they're unpacking stuff and it seems that where's the coffee pot and where's the coffee cups? That seems to be one of the first things that people want to know
Mhm.
where that is first, right? Everything else doesn't matter, but where's the coffee and the coffee cups? Because I can live on coffee. It feels that way.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
So that's a piece of advice. If people are your age and they're are thinking about purchasing a home, and even if they're not your age, even if they're older, even if they're Gen X like me, or or millennial, what's some advice that you have for them that you would say, hey, listen, this is what I think you need to be thinking about or do?
After they buy the house or when
No,
they're going?
but when they're thinking about purchasing.
I think especially for people that are around my age and that are considering it, and I know we touched on it earlier, it's just think more about not the financial aspect. And I know it's hard to because, you're young and it's a big chunk of your net worth and all that stuff, but think more about where you want to be, what you want in your home over that piece.
Mm.
As long as, of course, as long as it's within your budget. But
Right. What about in terms of controlling your emotions in this process? Because there's a lot of emotions that can happen here. Do you have any advice for people when they're buying their first home in terms of controlling their emotions or how they should look at that emotionally?
I'm not that emotional of a person, so it's hard for me to give that advice.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
that's what I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Because I mean, you seem to be
Yeah.
just taking it all in stride,
Yeah.
and that doesn't always seem to be the most common things that people do. Is just
Mhm.
take it in stride like you do. And but also, though, I noticed with you that you were so focused on the investment piece of it. And to me, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you kind of had this plan all along that this was going to be a long-term investment. Is that pretty true?
Yeah, like, I would probably wanna rent out this property, when I buy another house, so
Okay, this is really important. So you bought your first house knowing that this isn't going to be the place you're going to live forever.
I would say so, yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. And so, I mean, did you have that plan involved in your mind already from the very beginning that you knew that this was going to be a rental?
That is one of the questions I would ask myself because I would look on all the housing sites, and I'd say, "Is this a rentable place?" And that's
Ah,
one of the questions I would ask myself before I even toured a house, so
so that was part of your buying strategy then, was to also consider, is this something I can rent in the future?
Mhm.
Now, how did you arrive? I mean, so when you looked at this townhouse that you purchased, and what's your girlfriend's name?
Ashley.
Ashley. So we need to say shout out to Ashley because she's going to be watching. So we need to give her a little shout out there. Hi, Ashley. So, I mean, was she aware that this was also going to be a rental down the road,
Oh, yeah.
and she was okay with that?
Mhm.
Okay. So when you're going about this, does Tony know this now too?
Mhm.
Is he fully aware? So he
He's
know.
fully aware, yeah.
Okay, so he knows that this is not just a place you're going to live in. This is going to be a future investment.
I would say so, yeah, and he told me that. He said the rental value of this property is more than the mortgage payment, so that was a
Ah,
big selling piece for me too.
right. And mortgage and rental the average rental has not gone down,
Mhm.
by the way. So if you're looking at rentals, right? I mean, now the investment becomes even more valuable
Mhm.
for you. That had to kind of make you feel good.
It definitely did, yeah.
So how long do you think you're going to stay in this house? In your thought process? In
Probably like 4 or 5 years if I
Okay,
had to say.
okay. You're thinking that long. So now, have you already started saving then for the next house?
For sure, yeah.
Okay. And how
Mhm.
do you go about doing that?
My saving, I kinda treat saving as an expense,
Okay.
So when my checks hit, I wanna save this amount and kinda treat it as an expense, so
Okay. That's awesome. Now, what about, do you have any debt?
I do.
Okay. How do you handle debt? And then, because, a lot of people say, I was trying to be debt free, but you have some debt. So how did you handle dealing with debt and also trying to pay for a house?
Yeah, so the only debt I have is college debt, and
Okay.
it's been in forbearance for 2.5 years with no interest. So, in my mind, it would be smart to pay the loan, but I also want to know exactly how much I'm going to pay, and so I've kind of just been holding off on that until all the answers. But the payment when it comes back is only like $200 a month,
Oh,
so
wow.
it's
Okay.
not too overbearing. But I do want to eliminate that once the interest starts accumulating
Okay.
again.
All right. Got it. Is there, now that you're in this house, right? Is there something, what are some of the things that you might do differently that you didn't do on the net when you buy the next one?
I would focus more on the house itself and the features of the house rather than the financial piece.
What would
That's the
be
theme for me.
what would be
Yeah.
some of the features that you would want in your next house that maybe you didn't think about in this one?
I don't think I want shared walls. I definitely don't want shared walls. I
Yeah.
want to be in a townhouse, and just probably more modern. It's a relatively new house that I'm in, 2009 built, but
Right.
I do like modern homes, and probably bigger. Yeah.
And even bigger. When you say that now, looking at it, looking back at it, right? I mean, even though there's no regrets, because I mean,
Mhm.
clearly you have a good investment. Clearly, you're going to be able to rent this house, and you're going to be doing well renting the house. Which your smile just got really huge because you're going to have something huge. I mean, how important would you say to a first-time home buyer, based on your experience, is to say, you know what? Yeah, the investment's great, but how much would you temper that with what you want?
Can you rephrase that for me?
Yeah, so I mean, if you were to balance out what you want in a house versus the investment, I mean, you went all in on the investment piece, and now you're kinda going, how would you balance those
You
2?
definitely don't want to just, I mean, unless you have all the money in the world and that's what you want, then by all means, but
Right,
you definitely don't want to just spend needlessly just
right.
because that's what you want. I don't know if that makes sense,
Well, yeah,
but
if you were to advise somebody in their first house,
mhm.
would you say, "Listen, pick 2 or 3 things that you really want in the house first," or would you say, "You know what? I really don't have any regrets." If you go all in the investment and you just live with what you gotta live with and you're gonna rent it, go that route first, or is there a little bit more balance in there that you would share?
I think the balance is ideal, and for me, I was swayed one way, so
Right,
I would say trying to balance both of those out and not forgetting your needs before the finance piece.
right.
I think that's the ultimate goal.
What do you think Tony did the best for you? Of all the things that he did for you, what do you think was the best thing he did?
Um, he obviously has a lot of experience. I would say just his guidance with, picking out the right offer. Not It wasn't too high, and the seller was happy with it, and even in that market. So he just worked. I would say he worked the magic with the pricing and the offer.
Would you use him again?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Good for you. We've already done it. Believe it or not, our time is up.
Mm,
You've been absolutely great. Thanks for being on the
yeah.
show.
Thanks for
Appreciate
having
it.
me.
Stay here with me. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what? That's the show. Yeah, it's 30 minutes long. Listen, you know what? We're here at Linda Craft Team Realtors, and Bill Smith was with us. And as a first-time home buyer, I hope you gained some knowledge out of what he said. Because if you're a first-time home buyer, listen, we'd love to work with you. Tony or whoever would love to work with you here at the team. Feel free to give us a call. It's 919-235-0007. That's 919-235-0007. And if you want to work with Tony's realtor, you just go to tony@lindacraft.com and you can work with Bill's realtor. You know what? This is the show. It is called Real Estate Right Now. We talk about real estate matters that matter to you, and we talked about first-time home buyers. We're so thankful that you join us everywhere all over the world. Thank you everybody for watching. And Paul Pitfall, great show. Will was an awesome client. Yeah, it's Paul using the alias page. Awesome. You know what? Thanks everybody for watching. And as we say to you everywhere, thank you. We know you have a lot of choices. You chose us. Ciao, everybody.